In the dark corners of our world, there's something terrifying, something we can't always see but can certainly feel. A fear we all know, a fear of the unknown. A fear that settles quietly into the bones of the night, only to become sharper when you realize, it might be closer than we think. It began in the quiet suburbs of Detroit, Michigan. A killer, whose name remains etched in the darkest corners of local lore. Four innocent children, Mark, Jill, Christine, and Timothy, vanished in the dead of winter. Their bodies, abandoned like forgotten pieces of a puzzle, still haunt the hearts of those who remember.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
Their killer. Never found. Years passed. Leads turned cold. The investigation, once the largest in U.S. history, ended without an arrest. And yet, the shadow remains. The killer. Still free. Their identity? A chilling unknown. It's a case that has echoed through Michigan streets, a lingering question, one that still goes unanswered. Why hasn't justice been served? And is it possible the killer is closer than we imagine? From Michigan to Scotland, and beyond, killers remain elusive, and justice is a distant hope. We'll be uncovering their twisted legacies, piecing together the shocking facts, and asking the question, who are these monsters? And why have they never been caught? In 1976, Oakland County, a quiet suburban area in Michigan, became the focus of a national nightmare. It was a time when safety was something most families took for granted, when children could play outside without fear. But in this otherwise peaceful community, 4 innocent lives were about to be taken. Mark Stebbins, Jill Robinson, Christine Mihalik, and Timothy King, all between the ages of 10 and 12, disappeared without a trace. This wasn't just another missing persons case. It wasn't a typical story of a child running away or getting lost. The nightmare didn't end with their disappearances. These children were found, each in a different public location, abandoned, lifeless, and eerily posed. Mark Stebbins was discovered near a highway. Jill Robinson found in a nearby field. Christine Mihalik, hidden in the woods. And Timothy King, left alone, his body discarded in a desolate parking lot. The world was left to wonder, what happened in the hours, maybe days, before their deaths. Mark Stebbins was just 12, a shy boy with an enormous fascination for airplanes. His dream was to become a pilot one day, and he would spend hours looking up at the sky, imagining himself soaring through the clouds. He had that quiet innocence about him, the kind that makes you believe nothing could harm him. But something did. The second victim, Jill Robinson, was the embodiment of adventure. Ambitious and bright, she was a girl who never stood still. Whether it was riding her bike through the neighborhood or jumping into a new hobby, she was a force of nature. Yet, her life was stolen in an instant, and the world would never know how far her dreams would have taken her. Then there was Christine Mihalik. A sweet, intelligent child, Christine had the kind of heart that made everyone around her smile. She was a bookworm, eager to soak up the world around her, a girl who seemed wise beyond her years. Christine's kindness wasn't enough to save her, and the world lost a star that day. And Timothy King, the youngest of them all, had the kind of energy that would light up any room. He wanted to be a scientist, to unravel the mysteries of the world, but that future was tragically stolen before it could even begin. At just 11 years old, his life was full of potential, yet it ended in a way no one could understand. The killer wasn't random. These children weren't snatched on a whim. For days, they were held captive, groomed, and manipulated. They were fed, cared for in strange, twisted ways, only to be killed in the end. The final moments of their lives are a chilling unknown, but what we do know is that their captor was organized. A predator who knew how to make them feel safe before ultimately ending their lives. Mark Stebbins was abducted on February 15, 1976. Jill Robinson was taken less than 2 months later. Christine Mihalik followed shortly after, and then Timothy King, whose murder was the final piece of a sickening pattern. The bodies of all 4 children were discovered in plain sight, each victim exposed to the world like a cruel reminder of the killer's power. The investigation that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. The largest in U.S. history at the time, it generated over 18,000 tips. The police established a task force, mobilizing nearly every resource available, trying to track down leads and piece together a killer's trail. But despite the relentless efforts of hundreds of detectives and officers, the trail ran cold. Who was behind this? Why were they never caught? Years went by. The case, though massive, was eventually stalled. The killer remained free, slipping away time and time again. Why? Was the killer someone they had already passed over? Someone hiding in plain sight, or perhaps someone who knew how to stay under the radar? The questions only deepened. Several names haunted the investigation over the years. The first, Christopher Bush, stood out. Bush, a man with a disturbing past and connections to the victims' families, seemed like a prime suspect. But the evidence linking him to the crime was circumstantial at best. A drawing found in his home, resembling one of the victims, raised red flags. Blood-stained ligatures that could have been used to bind the children only made things more chilling. But the most shocking discovery came when Bush took his own life in 1978. A tragic end to a troubled man. But did he take the truth to the grave with him? Or was his suicide just part of a much larger, darker conspiracy? Then there was Arch Sloan. Sloan, a convicted child sex offender, became another key suspect when investigators found hair in his car that matched hair found on the victims. But here's where things get even more complicated. The hair didn't match Sloan himself. It was a mitochondrial DNA match, meaning it could have belonged to someone else entirely, perhaps an accomplice, or maybe someone who had access to his vehicle. Despite these clues, no arrest was made. Arch Sloan was serving a life sentence for other unrelated crimes, but his connection to the murders was never proven. Throughout the years, various individuals were linked to a larger network, a ring of predators operating in the area. Some investigators believed the killer could have been part of a more organized network, perhaps linked to known sex offenders. But these theories remain just that, unproven. The truth is, no one person has ever been definitively tied to the deaths of these children. Despite the advances in forensic technology and the long years of investigation, the killer remains unidentified. Could the truth be closer than we think? Or has it been buried by the passage of time? As of today, the investigation into the Oakland County child killer remains open. The Michigan State Police continue to follow up on new tips, re-examine cold evidence, and use modern DNA technology in the hopes of finally solving the case. They believe they've identified the people involved in the killings, but they still lack sufficient evidence for an arrest. Even now, decades after those children's lives were taken, the truth still evades us. And yet, the search continues. In the dark alleys of Glasgow, Scotland, during the late 1960s, another killer stalked the night. The women of the Barrowland Ballroom were his prey. They were young, full of life, and each had their own hopes and dreams. They should have danced in the arms of the people they loved, but instead, they met a terrifying fate. 3 women, their lives cruelly stolen, and their deaths similar. Each woman had been strangled, their bodies left in places that should have felt safe, just steps away from their homes. These weren't random killings, these were carefully planned. And in every case, the killer's method was unerringly consistent. The brutality, the precision, the chilling nature of it all. But there was one detail that would forever link these murders together. One name that echoed in the streets of Glasgow, Bible John. Each victim had a peculiar connection to the killer, a detail that sent shivers through the investigation. It all started with Helen Pudik's sister, Jean, who had been in a taxi with Helen and the man shortly before her murder. As the 2 women shared a ride home from the Barrowland Ballroom, Jean overheard the man introduce himself as John and begin quoting from the Bible. He spoke in a harsh tone, condemning adulterous women, casting judgment upon them as if they were already condemned. Those words, those chilling words, would become the cornerstone of the investigation. Bible John was no longer just a man, they were his words, his condemnation. It would become the name that defined him, but also a symbol of the mystery that would haunt Glasgow for decades. The police launched a massive manhunt, an investigation that stretched for months, involving thousands of interviews, composite sketches, and tips flooding in from every corner of the city. Yet, despite all their efforts, the killer remained elusive, a ghost. No arrests were made. The man who had struck terror into the heart of Scotland seemed to vanish as quickly as he had appeared, his identity buried in the dark corners of history. As the months turned to years, the frustration grew. The police had a name, Bible John, but no face to match it. Witnesses came forward, but none could offer a clear description of the man. The composite sketches varied, and no one could provide enough concrete details to draw a clear picture of the killer. For the families of the victims, the silence was deafening. Each new lead brought hope, but each was ultimately a dead end. Over the years, several names surfaced. One name that kept coming up in the investigation was Peter Tobin, a convicted serial killer who had been arrested for unrelated crimes. Tobin's modus operandi seemed eerily similar to that of Bible John. His ability to blend into the crowd, to charm and manipulate, fit the profile. But DNA testing eventually cleared Tobin of involvement in the murders. Still, the question lingered, could they have missed something? Was Tobin really innocent? The speculation surrounding him only deepened the mystery, but for now, he was ruled out. Another potential suspect was John Irvine McInnes, a man with connections to the police force. McInnes had been a prime suspect during a cold case review in the 1990s. In fact, detectives involved in the review claimed there was enough evidence to arrest him, but McInnes had already passed away by then. Some believed there was a cover-up, that McInnes' connection to a senior officer had kept his name out of official records. But, when his body was exhumed and DNA tests were conducted, the results were inconclusive. As the years passed, new leads continued to surface. In the 2000s, another name was introduced, this time a man with a surname similar to Templeton or Sempleson. Police Scotland took the new lead seriously and began re-examining old evidence. Could this new suspect be the key? Was there another name that had been overlooked? Today, the investigation is far from closed. Police Scotland continues to follow up on new leads and re-evaluate old evidence. With advancements in forensic technology, there is still hope that the identity of Bible John could be uncovered. Could the killer still be alive? Could the truth finally come to light after all these years? Perhaps the answer lies buried in those old files, those forgotten leads, or perhaps, it's something as simple as a witness who remembers just one more detail, something that finally puts the puzzle pieces together. It's a thought that keeps the families of the victims, still grieving, still searching, holding on to hope. The truth may be out there, hidden in plain sight. The legacy of Bible John is one of unanswered questions and lingering mysteries. But one thing is certain, the search isn't over. There are still those who believe the killer could still be among us, his identity just waiting to be revealed. Could justice still be served after all these years? Or has the truth been lost forever in the shadows of Glasgow's past? In the shadowed corners of Belgium, there was a predator, a man whose name would send shivers down the spine of anyone who dared speak it. His victims were women living on the edges of society, often overlooked by the world. They were found in pieces, dismembered with a precision so disturbing it suggested a mind capable of unimaginable horrors. His trail of carnage stretched across Belgium and into northern France, a sickening pattern that no one could stop. Victim 5 women. 5 lives cut short in the most horrific of ways. Their names are barely remembered today, but their deaths forever altered the quiet towns they came from. Carmelina Russo, 42, was a woman with a troubled past, living near the Mons railway station, a place many considered the underbelly of the town. Martine Bone, 43, another woman caught in the grips of poverty, was found far from the safety of her home. Jacqueline Leclerc, 33, a woman whose life had been marked by hardship, her body was found discarded in a wooded area. Natalie Goddard, 21, a young woman on the verge of discovering herself, who never got the chance to. Begonia Valencia, 37, a woman who had no known family in the area and whose tragic fate would remain a mystery for decades. These women were from different walks of life, but they shared a tragic fate, a killer who not only took their lives but took their dignity, their humanity, piece by piece. The butcher of Mons didn't just murder his victims, he dismembered them. And he did so with chilling precision, as though he had a medical or butchery background. Each woman's body was found in different locations, each part of them scattered across the countryside like a twisted puzzle. Some bodies were found in rivers, others along roadsides, or dumped in remote, desolate areas. The remains were meticulously cut apart, each body part disposed of separately, no sign of struggle, no evidence of a fight. The butcher seemed to know exactly what he was doing, a predator who methodically tore apart the lives he ended. A true monster, not just in action, but in the cold, calculated way he treated the lives of his victims. The investigation into these gruesome murders was one of the largest in Belgium's history, spanning across countries and involving numerous law enforcement agencies. Yet, despite all the resources put into it, the killer was never caught. The case remains one of Belgium's most terrifying unsolved mysteries. The police conducted extensive interviews, followed up on countless tips, and even consulted forensic experts. They scoured the areas where the bodies were found, hoping to uncover something, anything, that would lead them to the butcher. But as the months passed, the trail grew colder, and the mystery only deepened. How could someone be so elusive? How could they commit such atrocities, leave behind such a trail of blood, and still vanish without a trace? The question hung in the air, unanswered. And to this day, the darkness remains, no closure, no justice, just a lingering terror that still haunts the quiet streets of Mons. One name that repeatedly surfaced during the investigation was Smail Tulja, a Montenegrin man with a criminal past. Tulja had been convicted of a similar crime in New York in 1990, a gruesome dismemberment murder. When he came to Belgium, some believed he was the butcher of Mons. The similarities were undeniable, the method of dismemberment, the calculated disposal of the bodies. Could he have been the one who terrorized Belgium? But despite the compelling evidence, Tulja was dismissed as a suspect. The investigators ruled him out, citing the fact that he had been living far from the Mons area when the murders occurred. Yet, some continued to wonder, was he truly innocent, or was something more sinister at play? Could the authorities have overlooked the obvious? Still, the question remained, was Tulja the butcher? Or was there another predator lurking in the shadows of Mons, someone who had learned how to avoid detection, a master at covering their tracks? With Tulja's death in 2012, the truth seemed to slip further away. And now, only the memories of the victims remain. The case remains open, with Belgian authorities continuing to examine new leads and revisiting old evidence. DNA samples from the crime scenes have been re-examined, and advances in forensic technology have opened new avenues for investigation. But even with all these breakthroughs, the butcher of Mons remains a mystery. His identity, his motives, his very existence, all are shrouded in the darkness of the unknown. The search for the butcher is not over, but with each passing year, the trail grows colder. Will justice ever be served? Will the killer ever be found? For now, the answers lie buried somewhere in the dust of history, and the victims' families are left to wonder if they will ever get the closure they deserve. But even as the case goes cold, new pieces of the puzzle continue to surface. Could someone else know something that could unlock the mystery once and for all? And if the butcher is gone, does that mean the terror is over? Or is there another predator, still out there, waiting to strike? In the vibrant streets of San Francisco, a killer's sketches became his signature. A predator who lured his victims with the charm of art, only to lead them to a brutal and violent death. He was called the Doodler, a name that strikes fear even now. His victims were men, targeted for who they were, drawn in by the promise of companionship but ultimately abandoned to a fate of unimaginable horror. Gerald Earl Kavanaugh, a 49-year-old man whose life was cut short after a brief encounter with the killer. He was found stabbed in Golden Gate Park, one of the many victims left in isolated areas, their lives snuffed out in moments of intimacy and trust. Joseph Stevens, only 27, a man full of promise and potential, was another victim of the Doodler's cruel hand. Found in a secluded spot near the city's edge, Stevens' body bore the same chilling marks of the killer's work, violent and without remorse. Other victims, too, fell prey to the Doodler's attacks. All were gay men, lured from the nightlife of San Francisco's Castro district. Each victim had been drawn into a trap, unknowingly participating in what would be their final moments. The Doodler preyed on men who were part of a marginalized community, making them even more vulnerable. And in his twisted mind, his victims became nothing more than a canvas, each one drawn to their death. The Doodler's method was disturbingly unique. He didn't just kill, he lured. Before each murder, the killer would approach his victim in a bar, often in the Castro district, and draw a caricature of them. A harmless interaction, one that could easily be brushed off as an innocent conversation. But it was never innocent. After the drawing, he would lead his victims to secluded locations, parks, dark alleyways, places where they felt safe. And then, without warning, he would strike. The Doodler's weapon of choice was a knife, and his brutality was evident in the way the victims were found, stabbed multiple times, their bodies abandoned as though they were nothing more than discarded art supplies. The attacks were swift, and the victims' screams were often the only sound that filled the silence of their deaths. Yet, no one heard them. The killer was always gone before anyone could react. Each death was a violent and calculated act, leaving behind nothing but blood, a drawing, and a chilling sense of unease in the city. The police were stumped. Despite the increasing body count and the eerie similarities in each of the cases, they couldn't seem to connect the dots. And what made it even more complicated was the reluctance of the gay community to cooperate with authorities. During the 1970s, the relationship between law enforcement and the LGBTQ+ community was strained at best. Many feared that coming forward would not only expose them to public scrutiny but could also make them targets themselves. The Doodler's killings were kept largely under wraps by the police for fear of exacerbating tensions. No one could say for sure if the killings were related, no one except the killer, and he wasn't talking. The police had very little to go on. Eyewitnesses had seen little, and the Doodler's sketch of his victims didn't offer much beyond a vague description. As the case went on, it became clear, the killer was slipping away, his identity still a mystery, his motives still unclear. In 2018, the San Francisco Police Department took a fresh look at the Doodler case. New forensic techniques, including DNA testing, were brought to bear on the decades-old evidence. The hope was that technology could finally unearth the truth. DNA recovered from one of the crime scenes was tested again, and there was optimism that this new evidence might lead to a breakthrough. But the question lingered, could the Doodler still be alive? Could the killer, who had evaded justice for so long, finally be brought to account? But despite the fresh efforts, the case still hasn't been solved. The killer remains at large, and each new lead seems to fade into nothingness. The Doodler might have been just another name in the long list of unsolved cases, but he wasn't, he's a part of San Francisco's dark history. His murders left scars, and those scars have not healed. The investigation continues, with the San Francisco Police Department actively pursuing leads. But after more than 40 years, there is still no arrest, no closure. The Doodler remains one of the city's most elusive serial killers. While the case hasn't gone cold, the trail is growing colder by the day. Police believe the killer is still alive, possibly living in the Bay Area, but the lack of solid evidence leaves them grasping at straws. The case is as haunting as ever, and it serves as a stark reminder that the killer may still be out there, walking among us, undetected. The question still hangs in the air, who was the Doodler? What drove him to target these men? And why hasn't he been caught? The killer's identity remains a mystery, and with every passing year, it becomes less likely that the truth will be uncovered. For the victims' families, for the people who loved them, closure is still a distant hope. Did the Doodler stop killing, or did he simply fade into the background of history? Could there be more victims, more lives that have yet to be discovered? The case continues to haunt the city, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in the most unexpected places. But for now, the answers remain just out of reach, hidden somewhere in the shadows of time. For serial killers, still at large. Their names have haunted the communities they terrorized for years. Mark Stebbins, Jill Robinson, Christine Mihalik, Timothy King. Patricia Docker, Jemima McDonald, Helen Pudek. Carmelina Russo, Martine Bone, Jacqueline Leclerc, Natalie Goddard. And Begonia Valencia. Gerald Earl Kavanaugh, Joseph Stevens, Klaus Achim Christman, and many others whose lives were cut short in the most brutal of ways. The victims remain, each story etched in history, their faces frozen in time, their families still searching for answers. Their names, now almost forgotten, are part of a larger story, one that we cannot let slip into the past. The search for answers continues, with the ghosts of the past haunting the present, but one thing is clear, justice is not always swift. Sometimes, it doesn't come at all. The hope of closure remains, but the questions persist, unanswered and lingering in the air like a cold wind that never stops. These monsters, these killers, are still out there. Their identities remain unknown, their motives unclear. But they walk among us, and they hide in the shadows of our cities, evading the law, evading the truth. If you have any information regarding any of these cases, please contact the authorities. Your tip could be the key to solving these mysteries. You may hold the answer that finally brings justice to these forgotten victims. They deserve to have their stories told, and their killers deserve to be brought to justice. The killers may still be out there, slipping through the cracks of time. But so too is the possibility of justice. The search continues, still, we hold on to the hope that one day, the truth will find its way to the surface. That the names of the victims will no longer be the only thing we remember them by, but that their killers will be caught, and justice will be served. Let's hope the truth, the full truth, eventually rises to the surface and we can say, at long last, the hunt is over. The truth has been revealed. Until then, the mystery remains. And we will keep searching, we will keep questioning, we will keep remembering. Because these victims, and the others who have yet to have their names spoken, deserve nothing less.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.